Welcome to English 4E. This is grade 12 English, the workplace level. We are in term 1B. This is class 5. We're working on lesson 2 today, key questions 6 and 7. It is November 18th, and this is Jillian Percy. All the ways to contact us. The studio number is 1-800-465-7144. That's if you want to participate with the class while we're on air. The office number is 1-800-667-3703, and my extension is 2211. My email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca, and my Facebook is capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. Now, if you send me a friend request, it doesn't necessarily show up on my email, but if you send me a message, it always will. So let me know what your proper student name is, what class you're in, and then I'm ready to answer your questions. All these classes are recorded and posted on YouTube. There is a school channel called the WASA Distance Education Center channel, and there is my teacher channel, which is also G Percy WASA, and either one of those will have a playlist called 2526 ENG4E. Okay. There are multiple ways to hand in assignments. If you have a learning center in your community, you can give it to the DEC and ask them to scan it and email it to me. You can also fax it to me at 1-800-463-7852. Let me know that you're going to do that so I can turn on the fax machine. If you live in town, in Sioux Lookout, you can bring the assignments to me. A lot of students like to do their work on computer and then email it to me as an attachment, or you can also share documents with me through Google Docs. When you do that, include me and the student work email, and make sure that we're allowed to view and to edit it. That way I can print it. I won't touch your assignment, I just need to be able to print it off, okay? If you are doing handwriting, a lot of people take pictures of it then, and only take a picture of one page at a time. Make sure the writing isn't blurry, don't tilt the phone at a weird angle while you're taking the photograph, and send it as an attachment rather than directly as an email. I can also take it through Facebook. If you're going to take pictures a lot, I strongly recommend downloading Adobe Scan. It will produce a much better quality document, okay? It kind of makes the background really white. Like, I know our paper might look white when you're looking at it, but on the camera it often will look kind of yellow, and it's not the greatest contrast. So it produces a better quality if you're going to be doing a lot of those. Send your work to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. That way the secretary can log that you submitted the work. And physically on your assignment, somewhere you should have typed or written your full name, the course name, the assignment number and name. And if a writing assignment asks you for a rough and a good draft, please label it at the top so that I know which one it is, because they get marked differently and often for a different amount of marks. Okay. We are in week 2 right now, and we're on Tuesday, class 5. We should be getting through 6 and probably 7, and then tomorrow hopefully 8 and 9. Thursday I'm going to be away in Cat Lake, so if you are any Cat Lakers out there listening to this, we should be there Thursday. Come on by and we'd be happy to talk to you. And I will record the class that I miss on Thursday. I'll record on Friday at some point, okay? All right, so lesson 2, and here are the learning goals. Okay, these are a lot because it's kind of like a lot of finicky stuff for this one. That you can create compound sentences out of simple sentences using a comma and a coordinating conjunction. That you can create, explore, and expand on ideas for a writing assignment. That you can organize your ideas for writing by ordering them in an appropriate way for a narrative paragraph. That you can write in complete sentences that communicate meaning clearly and accurately, and use smooth and logical transition words and phrases. Use your knowledge of commonly confused words and common spelling errors to correct your work. Use your knowledge of parts of speech, including adjectives and adverbs, and how they work in a sentence to communicate your ideas. Understand and use periods, question marks, exclamation marks, and commas correctly in your sentences. Okay. So this is the question, and then I'm going to kind of talk about how to do it. Key question number 6 is a journal. They want you to write a paragraph consisting of at least 7 sentences on one of the topics that's on the next page. Keep in mind that a paragraph, we talked about this the other day, is a group of closely related sentences dealing with one main topic or idea. The first sentence, which is called the topic sentence, should state the main idea of the paragraph. All of the sentences in the paragraph should have a good subject, which would be a noun or a pronoun, and they should have good subject-verb agreement. This should help make the paragraph interesting. I'm not really worried about the antecedents and pronouns, I gotta be honest. I don't like that particular part of the assignment. Okay. It has summer 2022. I don't think it matters which summer vacation of whatever summer you wanted to take. A trip you've taken. You could talk about an elder in your community. You could even talk about what you hope to gain from the course. Okay. Okay, we went over this the other day. It's the same hamburger format. Opening sentence, 3 to 5 body sentences, and then a closing sentence that wraps things up. Here is a sample paragraph. When you choose a post-secondary institution to attend, there are many issues to consider. That's the topic or opening sentence. And then they go in to tell you what are all those things that you want to consider. You must consider the type of program you wish to pursue and determine which schools offer the most valuable course of study for your goals. You and your family must discuss the relative costs of various type of programs, deciding which schools are affordable to you. Your academic ability must be considered in terms of competition and grade requirements. Your personality must be taken into consideration as well. Are you prepared to work hard and be committed to doing well in your courses? Do you prefer large classes or small? Are you prepared to move, if necessary, to a bigger community or city? Or do you function best in a structured or loose setting? Choosing a post-secondary institution is a serious endeavor encompassing many different elements regarding the school, your goals, your abilities, and your preferences. And that's their closing sentence. They're just kind of winding everything up there. So that's a sample. Okay, so pick a topic. I'm definitely going to change these topics next year. I am open to other topics. I am leaning towards it being some sort of personal memory, okay? For these topics right now, take a look at each one and think about whether you've got anything to say on the topic. If you come up blank, then take a look at the next one, right? Or you can just take a look and think about which one's most interesting to write about. Once you've picked a topic, I want you to kind of brainstorm some ideas. Don't just dive in and start writing because it's very hard to work that way. I'm going to pick a trip I've written, and I'm going to think about possible activities or people or places I've visited. Remember, this part is just for you, so it doesn't need to be in complete sentences, just enough so that it makes sense to you. So I've brainstormed here about a trip I took to California. I was 12 years old. I went with my cousin. I stayed with my Aunt Megan. And we did a bunch of fun stuff. We visited Disneyland and saw fireworks. We went to the Six Flags amusement park. We went to Venice Beach. Got a terrible sunburn. Swam in the ocean. She had orange trees in the backyard, so you could just walk back and like pick an orange off the yard. And visited other cousins and other aunts and uncles. So that was that trip. It was a very memorable trip. I think probably because I was so young. Anyways, so it's only a paragraph, so that's probably enough for me to be able to write a paragraph. You don't need a whole lot of things. If I wanted to, I could also go through and write numbers next to them to show what order I wanted to talk about them in. For example, I could put the events in chronological order, like on my trip, here I did this, then I did that, then I did this. In this case, the trip was so long ago, I really don't remember what order things happened in, so I'm not going to worry about putting my ideas in order. I might talk about them in terms of importance, right? You can make your own choice as to how you want to talk about that kind of stuff. You can organize your paragraph in different ways, right? Chronological is a very common one in terms of importance, like smallest to the biggest or biggest to the smallest. If you're telling kind of like a story, you could use the plot graph structure where things start off slow, then they hit a high point, and then they kind of wrap back off again. So after I was thinking about it, I realized I'm going to start and end chronologically, but in the middle of the paragraph, I'm going to go by order of importance. So that's kind of a bit fussy. You can be as fussy or not as you want. So here's how I wrote things down, and then I put them in a completely different order. And then I ended up adding some details that I thought about. I might not add all these, right? The nice thing about brainstorming a little bit too much is you can pick your best things and leave out the boring stuff, okay? Hang on. Okay, so writing my opening sentence. You don't want to just dive right into the details. You kind of want to give the reader an overall sense of what the paragraph is going to be about. I like to brainstorm a bunch of different opening sentences. It's a great way to practice how to think about sharing the same information but in different ways. Okay, so here are some possibilities. And I'm sharing this because I know this is kind of the hard part, I think, for some people. Like, they think of one way and it feels like that's the only way you can say it. But um, language is very flexible. There's often lots of different ways to say things. So here are some of my examples. I will always remember my trip to California I took when I was 12 years old. I have been to many places across North America, but my trip to California holds a special place in my heart. We traveled a lot when I was a kid, but the best vacation ever was to California. We traveled a lot when I was a kid, but the time I got to travel without any adults was something special. My family traveled a lot when I was young, but the time I got to fly to another country without a parent is the vacation that I treasure. As a kid, I loved to travel with my parents each summer, but I was amazed the summer I got to travel without them. How do I pick the best sentence? Well, there's no real rules, right? I'm just going to pick the sentence that I think makes the reader want to find out more, right? I might change it later, but I like the last sentence best. Okay, and then I want to take all my point forms and turn them into interesting sentences, okay? If I have a point form where it says something like, flew with my 13-year-old cousin out of Detroit, Michigan to California, they tend to think, well, how can I turn that into a sentence the quickest way possible? And they just write, I flew with my 13-year-old cousin out of Detroit, Michigan to California. But there's actually so many ways I could use this detail in an interesting sentence. The vacation started when they dropped us off at the Detroit airport, just 12-year-old me and my 13-year-old cousin flying all by ourselves to our crazy aunt in California. I still can't believe that our parents let a 13-year-old and a 12-year-old fly across the country from Detroit to California just to visit our fun-loving aunt. I will never forget how grown up I felt getting on a huge plane in the middle of the busy Detroit airport without my parents, but only my 13-year-old cousin by my side. Now, all of these sentences are using that same original jot note, but they're adding more details, they're providing a little bit of a point of view, they're explaining the feelings, and they're helping to set the mood of the paragraph. So when you're turning your little notes into a sentence, think about how you can add your personality and your character into that writing. Okay, I could also have added more description. The airport was so huge and busy, I felt a little overwhelmed. But that was nothing compared to getting on that enormous plane with so many people. I couldn't imagine how the weight would get off the ground. Or I could have added dialogue. The moment we were on the plane, I whispered to my cousin, I can't believe they really let us go. Now, obviously, you don't have to write 6 versions of every sentence, but sometimes doing it when you feel stuck, or especially at the beginning, can really help you to write more interesting sentences and a more interesting paragraph. Okay, so here, this kind of shows you how I would work. If this was my desk, I would have my paper with my ideas on one side, I would have what I've written so far up top, and then I would slowly be looking at the rest of the points and turning them into more of the same at the bottom of the page, or even on a separate page if I felt like I needed another page. So as a kid, I loved to travel with my parents each summer, but I was amazed the summer I got to travel without them. I still can't believe that our parents let a 13-year-old and a 12-year-old fly across the country from Detroit to California just to visit our fun-loving Auntie Meg. It was exciting to be all by ourselves in the plane, but I was a little anxious when we arrived in California and was relieved to see Auntie Meg waiting for us. We got to have supper over at her friend's house, and they all treated us like we were grown-ups and not little kids. Plus, I got to meet some of my cousins for the first time, and someone took the greatest picture of us play fighting around in the front yard. Now, I might not use all of these. I might cut some of them out, but I'd rather write lots and have stuff I can edit out than not have enough and be scrambling to think of something to say. Okay? When you're doing your first write, don't try and edit at the same time. Just pour the ideas out on the page and then you can go back. If you're trying to write and edit at the same time, it can make you very anxious about writing perfectly, and that's kind of a killer for creativity. So we'll do revising and do editing later on, all right? So eventually, I've gone through all of this. I think we started off kind of here. I also remember going down to the ocean. The water was salty, the beach was beautiful, and the boardwalk full of vendors and trinkets was so fun to walk along. It was worth the terrible sunburn that followed, with our legs so burnt we could barely stand to sit on the chairs at the fancy restaurant we went to afterwards. We visited amusement parks like Six Flags, Knott's Berry Farm, and Disney World, which had the most spectacular fireworks at night. I think the best part of the trip for me was how our aunt acted as if we were practically adults, including taking us to raunchy movies our parents were horrified to discover we had seen. At a time in my life when I was terribly unhappy, all the events from that vacation gave me a lasting sense of being loved and appreciated that did not fade. Okay, so what can I improve or eliminate? It's about 10 sentences long. I could leave that, that's fine. It doesn't matter if you don't have to be exactly 7, going over is fine. I could get rid of a few if I don't think they're interesting or if they went off topic, or I might get rid of one so I can add some more details, right? So this kind of shows you how I would do stuff. If I was writing, I would just cross things off. I might double space my stuff so there was room to write things in between. If I was typing, I like being able to use the spot where you cross things off, but you leave it there, because sometimes when you're doing that, when you go back later, you're like, hey, you know what? Actually, I do like that sentence. And rather than having to try and remember how you did it, you just take away the cross off lines, and then you've got all your work right there. Okay? So I'm not going to read it through a third time, but that's kind of how I did a bunch of playing with it and thought about how to improve it. Oh, and then again, I still ended up doing some more because I kind of am fussy that way. Now, the assignment did specifically say that I needed to use pronouns and antecedents. If for some reason you didn't use any, now is a good time to add some, okay? Now, I don't think this part of the assignment is natural, and I probably take this out, but it's a good idea to know this kind of thing exists. I don't think that deliberately adding a pronoun is really a concern normally. The focus is more just trying to write well, that is grammatically correct and is interesting. So normally that's not something I worry about, right? I'm just going to grab a few sentences and think about how to add a pronoun into it. As a kid, I loved to travel with my parents each summer, but I was amazed the summer I got to travel without them. So them is referring back to parents, so there I've got one, okay? The other one, I think the best part of the trip for me was how our aunt acted as if we were practically adults, including taking us to raunchy movies our parents were horrified to discover we had seen. I could easily change that sentence to include pronouns and antecedents, and I'm just going to shorten so I can, there we go. Aunt Meg treating Kim and I as if we were adults throughout the trip was an unexpected bonus. Aunt Meg even took us, which refers back to Kim and I, to see raunchy movies that our parents scolded her is Aunt Meg, for letting us is Kim and I, see. So these two sentences are using pronouns and antecedents together. As you're looking through your stuff, the big thing to check is sentence structure. Make sure you don't have any incomplete sentences or any run-on sentences. So incomplete means it's either missing a subject, in other words, I can't tell who or what you're talking about, or it's missing the verb. I find that's really rare. People don't generally miss the verb, but I do find occasionally people just assume, well, the last sentence I was talking about Aunt Meg, so I'm talking about her this sentence too, but they forget to include that. So watch out for that particular problem. It's okay to have a long sentence. It's just you don't want to have three or four sentences that are joined together with and then, and then, and then, and then. That's a run-on sentence. Um, if you have a bunch of sentences that are joined with just commas, but no conjunctions, those are run-on sentences as well, okay? Now, sometimes you might have a long sentence, you're like, well, this is correct, but it's a bit confusing, so you might shorten things a little bit as well. All right? Yeah, that looks good still. Now, this is also a great time to make sure you used interesting adjectives and adverbs that help create a vivid picture in the reader's mind. That doesn't mean that every sentence needs to have multiple adjectives and adverbs, but sometimes we can get used to kind of writing bare bones, like the way we talk, right? When I'm talking, I don't usually say a whole bunch of adjectives, like, oh, the hot and spicy pizza I had for my hour-long lunch was warm and delicious, right? It sounds a little bit goofy if we're talking that way and we add those all in, but for writing, it makes sense. Okay, I mean, obviously you don't want to go overboard, but you still want to make sure you're using adjectives and adverbs to help create a vivid picture in your reader's mind. Okay? For example, if you're talking to a friend who knows you and you want to explain which house you moved into, I might say something simple like, oh, I moved into Johnny's old house. But if I'm talking to someone who doesn't live in my neighborhood, I might need to add some adjectives or some adverbs that explain it a little more. I moved to the gray two-story house that's near that corner by the airport and the northern store. So gray and two-story are describing the house. Near is, it's kind of working as an adverb, kind of working as a preposition there. Northern is describing the store. Okay. After you've got that all done, you need to edit your work for small errors. Capitalization, usage, punctuation, spelling. We're not actually going to look at these individually because we've done these before. You can just go back and check. The big thing is keep in mind, spell check doesn't catch everything. Okay, neither does grammar check. I have absolutely caught mistakes that the computer didn't catch. So success criteria is what am I looking for with this? First of all, I'm looking that you followed good paragraph format with an opening and closing sentence, and that you follow kind of a narrative style. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. It's not just a string of facts. Relevant and interesting details are chosen about your topic, and they're explained in an appropriate order. You can choose the order, but it shouldn't just be a mishmash where I can't tell what was going on. Your paragraph should show a variety of sentence types and structures with good transitions and good vocabulary, and you should have good spelling, punctuation, capitalization, and grammar usage. Now, I mark this with a marking rubric. Hang on, it seems a little bit big here. All right. So up top is 3 marks. That it shows that you understand the question, the paragraph format. That's what I'm looking for. Then, what kind of details and examples did you select to explain your ideas, your opinion? Are there just a few? Are there lots? That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. More is better for there. Communication skills. How did you organize your writing? Is there obviously sentence variety and fluency? Clarity means like, is it clear what you mean, or am I confused as I read it? Tone, is it an appropriate tone for what you're talking about? Transitions are things like next, later on, as well, all those kind of like little transition phrases, and the type of vocabulary you use. So that's worth another 3 marks, and then 1 mark for spelling, grammar, capitalization, and punctuation, right? Okay, so that's the end of that lesson. We're going to move on to talking about adjectives, and this is for the upcoming assignment, which is, I believe, number 7. Okay, so basic definition of adjectives. Hang on, I'm going to make this a little bit. There we go. Adjectives describe nouns or pronouns. So they describe or modify people, places, things, or ideas. They can describe age, color, size, shape, purpose, number, origins, material, quality, or opinions. And I wanted to talk about, hang on, if more than one adjective is used in a sentence, which is really common, we follow what is known as the royal order of adjectives. If you grew up speaking English, this adjective order becomes something you instinctively follow automatically. However, if you are originally speaking a different language, your language might have different rules for adjectives, right? We don't all follow the same rules. In that case, the order has to be learned because there isn't really any real rhyme or reason as to why we use this order. You just kind of have to be familiar with it. If the order gets mixed up, it will often sound wrong or even kind of confusing to people, even if they can't explain why it sounds wrong. So if I said, I saw the green, huge house, it sounds slightly strange. In English, we would be more likely to say, I saw the huge blue house, or greenhouse. I saw the silk French beautiful cloth. I saw the beautiful French silk cloth. So I'm going to show you the order, okay? And then I'll kind of talk about some of the exceptions. So first we have determiners, okay? Determiners have some question as to whether they are considered adjectives or are a separate category, but either way, they will come in front of all the other adjectives. Things like that, the, these, your, this, her, or my. Then we've got quantity or numbers. Okay, 1, 8, many, none, some, 30. Some people consider those a type of determiner as well. Okay, but those would all come first. Then you've got opinion, right? What you think about it. Terrible, wonderful, frightening, sad, hair-raising, all those kinds of ideas. And then size, tiny, microscopic, big, huge, gigantic, enormous, medium-sized, long, or short. Age could be anything. It doesn't necessarily mean like 38 years old. It could be something like old, young, babyish, middle-aged, teenager, elderly, retired, ancient, new, vintage, retro. All those are age-related concepts. Shape can be circular, squared, elliptical, geometric, oval. It can be things like wavy or zigzaggy as well. Those are considered shape type words. Color, there's like 1,000 different color words, things like red, crimson, scarlet, azure, green, violet, indigo. Origin is like where is it from? This one is usually capitalized. French, American, British, Irish, Atlantic, European, Canadian, Dutch. Material means what is it made out of? Wooden, plastic, china, metallic, stone, gold, velvet, silk, copper, bone, artificial leather, rayon. There's loads more, just kind of an example. And then purpose. Purpose are sometimes considered like a compound adjective as well, but it's a special word that's describing the purpose of that noun. So like a hound dog, a pickup truck, a vampire bat, a picnic basket, a soccer ball, a computer desk. Like there could be any kind of desk, but a computer desk kind of becomes its own special category, right? Okay. Do we use commas between adjectives? Yes or no? If the adjectives are coming from the same category, then yes, you put in a comma there. So the disgusting, smelly pear should get thrown away. Disgusting and smelly are both types of opinions. However, adjectives from different categories are not considered to need a comma between them. So if I said the delicious yellow Welsh cheese had just arrived at the shop, technically those are all different categories, so I don't need commas between them. You never put a comma between the last adjective and the noun. Now, if I was not sure, I would probably err on the side of caution and just use a comma between adjectives. I think people are used to seeing it, and mentally, to me, it looks better. But that is strictly my opinion. Another teacher might feel differently, so I'm just making sure you know the rules. Hang on. Now, sometimes adjectives could be used in more than one category. For example, the word wooden can mean a type of material, right? But it can also be used as a way to describe a certain type of facial expression, which is considered like a quality or an opinion about it. So if I said, the old wooden mask hung on the wall, age comes before materials. That would work for this. But if I was talking about a real person and I was trying to describe that thing where their face isn't moving much, we sometimes call that a wooden expression. I might say the wooden old face barely moved as he cried soundlessly. And there, the quality comes before age. So it's the same words, but because they have a slightly different meaning, I could put them in a different order. All right. Here's the other one. This is kind of a funny one. Why do we say big bad wolf? Because that doesn't follow the order, right? We should be saying bad big wolf. But here's the thing. There's a rule that seems to cross over multiple languages that trumps or takes priority over the normal order of adjectives. And I'm not sure of the exact name of the rule. The one I saw was quite long, and I'm not going to repeat it here. But basically the idea is, if the words are spelled the same except for the vowel, we say the words with certain vowels first. So the I becomes before A, which will come before O, which is why we say tic-tac-toe, not toe-tack-tick. Other examples of those kind of words are flip-flop, ping-pong, tick-tock, crisscross, hip-hop, bing-bang. Long E or double E also comes before O, teeter-totter, bebop. Now, I know technically big and bad aren't spelled exactly the same, but because they're such small little three-letter words and they have the same consonant, the vowel rule takes over. And there isn't really, it has to do with the fact that how our mouth kind of forms the sounds. So we tend to want to say the ones that are formed up at the front of our mouth before the ones we say at the back of the mouth. This isn't one you have to remember, but in case you saw examples of this and were like, hey, why isn't this following the rule? I was trying to explain why it doesn't follow the rule. And occasionally people will break the order on purpose because they're trying to call your attention to something, right? If somebody was trying to talk to their assistant and they're wanting to emphasize the material over the color, they might put the material first. Like, I specifically said I wanted the wooden green bowl, not the glass green bowl, said the shopkeeper to his assistant. Now, that isn't the typical order. He's saying it that way to be able to emphasize that the material was the important part. Okay? Now, in the real world, we do not always put our adjectives right before the noun. That's a typical spot, but we don't always. It can also come after a state of being verb. Remember, those are things like is, are, am, was, were. The man was young and handsome. Those are adjectives. Now, I could have said it as, oops, wow, that did not like that, sorry. I could have said the young, handsome, nope, sorry, I gotta change that, I can tell it's wrong. The handsome young man was at the party. Okay. Now, you'll also notice when it's following afterwards, the royal order doesn't count. But when you're putting it right in front of the noun, it does. The wind was gentle and summery. Gentle and summery are adjectives describing the wind. Keep in mind, the sentence could still have an introductory phrase, like early in June, the wind was gentle and summery. I might be willing to date him if the man is young and handsome. Right? Those are all just different ways you can write your sentence. So, I am going to kind of, one more thing. These are the determiners I was talking about. They're articles, a, an, or the, which will come before any other adjectives. Possessives, so like my gray car, your blue book, his, her, its, our, their, and whose. Demonstrative, this, that, these, or those. This car, those people. Numerals, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ordinals, first, second, third, or fourth. And then quantifiers, things like a few, another, several, much, many, a lot of, any, some, or very. Again, I don't think it matters whether you consider them determiners or adjectives, as long as you understand that these ones are a priority and they will come first in a sentence. Okay, so key question 7 says, we're going to create and use adjective phrases. Now, they said for 10 marks, I've actually updated it, I think to about 15, I believe. All right, there we go. For each of the nouns, write an adjective in front of it. Okay? Don't use the same adjective over and over, right? So tall tree, bare tree. Remember, it's got to be an adjective, right? Sometimes I've had people try and turn these into a sentence like, I see a book. No, I'm just looking for an adjective. How could I describe the book? Two different ones. How could I describe the thunderstorm? Two different ones. How could I describe a house? How could I describe a movie? And how could I describe a girl? Okay. Part 2, after you've done that phrase making, choose one of your adjective phrases and write it into a sentence. Now, that's phrased badly. So for each of the 5 given nouns, choose one of your phrases and write a sentence until you have 5 sentences. So what I'm meaning here is pick one of the ones you used for book, not both of them. Pick one of the ones you used for thunderstorm, not both of them. One of the house, one of the movie, one of the girl. So you should end up with 5 sentences, 1 book, 1 thunderstorm, 1 house, 1 movie, 1 girl. Okay. The handsome man walked on the stage and all the girls cheered. I love to feel the gentle breeze on my phrase. You should have 5 sentences when you are finished the exercise. Here are the marking scheme, or what we love to call success criteria. 1/2 mark is given for each appropriate adjective placed in front of a noun in part 1 of the question for 5 possible marks. 1 mark is going to be given for each adjective noun combo from part 1 that is placed appropriately in a complete sentence of its own, 5 possible marks, and then 1 more mark given for using a capital letter on the first word of the sentence and appropriate end punctuation. That's period, question mark, exclamation point. 5 marks, total possible marks of 15. So here's an example. So chair, I could say broken chair or baby chair. Let's see here. I could have fast car. What else could I have? Old car. I want to try and use a different adjective for each one. Store. Might have a new store. Maybe it's my favorite store. The game could be a video game. Oops, sorry, I spelled that wrong. Video game. Or it could be hang on. I was thinking of a kid's game, but that introduces a different word besides an adjective. Why is my brain got dead? I don't know. I'll have to come think back and think about that. Here I might have a young doctor, and here I might have a experienced doctor. And I've run out of ideas for game there. Sorry. So, broken chair. He sat in the broken chair. For car, I've got fast or old. So let's see. My old car needs to last a few more years. Okay. Store. What were my choices here? All right. My favorite store is Chapters Bookstore. Okay, so that's what you're doing. Okay, some people try to skip this first part, but then you're losing a bunch of your marks, so don't skip it. Okay, now I'm going to kind of go over some examples because I know sometimes this is a hard part for people where they're not used to using a lot of adjectives, so I'm just kind of sort of helping you to generate some idea. Here are some age ones. Now, these can be referring to things like history, plants, clothes, not just people, like prehistoric times, medieval clothing, classical music, colonial times, or colonial political events, pre-contact. Some of them are capitalized if it's representing a specific age period. Elizabethan, Renaissance, Ming Dynasty, Bronze Age, the Jurassic. And then we've got ones that are kind of more people-oriented, babyish, teenage, middle-aged, elderly, senior. Oops, spelled wrong. Here we go. Junior, freshman, sophomore, college-aged. So, color names. There are so many interesting and unique names for colors. This is just like a quick little sample. Some of them don't always make sense to me, right? But some of them do. Be inventive if you're going to use color names. There's so many cool colors. Don't just stick with blue, right? Or with red. Look, we've got things like raspberry, imperial, Persian, maroon. All right. Size adjectives. Things that are really small might be microscopic, subatomic, minuscule, itty-bitty, tiny, minute, teeny. Medium size could be things like average, typical, moderate, normal, or standard. For large, we could have things like colossal, ginormous, mammoth, immense, vast, tremendous, big, gigantic, enormous, and huge. Then other types of size, because it isn't always big, medium, small. It could be things like tall or short, thick or thin, heavy or light. Pint-sized, hefty, sturdy, stocky, bony, slim, slender, wide, narrow, shallow, deep. Those would all count as size as well. Shapes, we got our typical ones could be circular, square, triangular, rectangular, oval, diamond, or teardrop. Then we've got things like cubed or cubic, globular, which will look like a globe, pyramid, cone or conical, zigzag, wavy, scalloped, striped, polka dotted, plaid, dashed, curly or spiraled. So when I initially heard adjectives of opinion or adjectives of quality, it's such a huge category because a lot of things are considered opinions that I mentally didn't think of as opinions, right? So sometimes they are describing these things as opinions, and they really mean they're describing the quality or the properties of something. Like, I eat the pizza and I think it's tasty. That's an obvious opinion to me. Dad ate it and thought it was terrible. That's another opinion. Mom took a bite and says it's greasy. Now, I didn't think of that as an opinion word. I think of that as you're just describing what it's like. But that's kind of in the category of opinions. John ate 4 pieces and says it's filling. Okay? It says all the words are red, but unfortunately the red disappeared there. So tasty, terrible, greasy, or filling are our adjectives of opinion or quality. Hang on. Adjectives of origin. Again, where it's come from, which could be a city or a country. It could be a bigger region or a continent or even a body of water. Pacific salmon, a Chinese vase, Swiss chocolate, a German car, American cotton, European oil. And then we've got the purpose adjectives. They almost sound like part of the noun because they're so specific. Things like running shoes versus soccer shoes, sleeping bag versus a grocery bag, frying pan versus a saucepan, computer table versus a kitchen table. See, I don't even think of those as adjectives, right? Sometimes you might hear those referred to as compound nouns. Picnic basket, shower stall, winter coat, oven mitts, gardening gloves, surgical mask, fitted sheet, rocking chair, toy boat. Now, there are a few special type of adjectives I wanted to cover. We're not necessarily using them here, but I wanted you to be aware they exist as we're writing. The compound adjectives we just kind of talked about, 2 or more words, they're saying these are hyphenated. I've not always heard of them as being hyphenated, but I could well be wrong. Here are some examples. She is a well-known artist. Well-known is acting as one compound adjective. I have a 10-page assignment. They gave a 10-minute break time. He took a 5-week course. We use cruelty-free products. Sometimes these are made up, like people just want to stick 2 words together that is descriptive. Other times they're really common, like the word well-known is a really common adjective. And then we've got what we call participle adjectives. Remember we talked about participles, verbs that end in ed or ing. But in that sentence, they may not be acting as a verb. They may be acting more as a description. Like if I said, I discouraged the man from coming home with me. I'm doing an action, so that counts as a verb. But if I said, the discouraged child started to cry, I'm not describing the action, I'm describing his feelings. I'm describing how that particular child is feeling. So it's a little bit different. Hang on. Here we go. Here's some examples. She was bored by the movie. I love this spiced food. He told us an interesting story. The excited dog barked all night. He creates inspiring artworks. Now, this one I actually do not think is correct. I'm going to put a little X next to that one. This one was in bored. I think they are acting as a verb, but the rest of this is describing the food. Interesting is describing the story. Excited is describing the dog. Inspiring is describing the artwork. So you can see how it can be a little bit confusing. All right, that brings us to the end of that assignment. Tomorrow's Wednesday, and so we will cover hopefully the next two assignments. And then, like I said, I'll be away Thursday. If you are in Cat Lake and need me to bring anything, let me know. Send me an email so I can bring it. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.